Hi everyone, welcome to Fibro and Photos. What I thought I'd do to kick off this channel is share a presentation that I gave to a Fibromyalgia Support Network based in Canada. They've been operating for 10 years and they asked me to give a talk about how I use creativity in my photography to help cope with the life with fibromyalgia. So I did that back in October 2024. It was very well received and I thought I'd share it here because it gives an insight into the challenges of living with fibromyalgia, as well as an insight into my photography and how and why I create some of the images and the locations that I go to shoot. What it doesn't tell you is what fibromyalgia is, so a quick explanation here, because obviously these people understand what life with fibromyalgia is like. Fibromyalgia is a neurological condition. The nervous system, should I say, gets stuck in fight or flight mode. The brain then starts perceiving pain where there isn't. So it's kind of a wiring. The best way to explain it from the conversations I've had with neurologists and the research I've done is that the wiring in the brain has gone a little bit haywire and is perceiving pain where there shouldn't be. So there's 24/7 pain throughout the body, constant sense of fight or flight in the nervous system. That therefore involves, for me at least, complex chronic pain, which means that it gives me severe brain fog, cognitive challenges, trying to function, coordination, trying to speak. You'll notice my eyes closing as I'm talking here, and a whole host of other challenges. So the video explains a little bit more. I just wanted to give an explanation of what fibromyalgia is. As I go through further videos sharing my photography from various shoots and ideas that I've had, just to share my experience with fibro and as a photographer, then that will become a little bit clearer into what life with fibromyalgia is like. Anyway, here's the presentation. Just as an aside, I was presenting at 9 PM UK time to a group in Canada. It was 4 PM their time. So if I sound a little bit sluggish, I do get going eventually, then that's the reason. This is normally a time when my symptoms really ramp up, normally a time of day where I'm just working on winding down, getting ready so that I can go to bed and hopefully get a decent night's sleep, although there's no such thing as restorative sleep with fibromyalgia, but at least get some sleep in the evening. So if I sound a bit sluggish, that'll be the reason. Anyway, enjoy the presentation. Thank you. Well, I am going to talk about photography. I do also blog under the Fibro and Photos name, and increasingly I'm realizing that that is the way forward to promote my photography, bringing the two together. I've got on here that I'm a photographer and fibromyalgia advocate. As Irene said, I do write blogs. I'm active on the online community in a positive way, and the more supportive side of fibro. But also that means then coming into writing, and as I'm doing tonight, speaking. And I did recently do a presentation to a photographic club that I belong to in my hometown. And you never know how people are going to receive the information about fibromyalgia, but I have to say it was overwhelmingly supportive. So my message to people from that experience has been to go out and share your story with people, because you just don't know how it's going to be received. And I think it's more support out there than there is negative, as far as as far as I've been encountered anyway. So I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of my background and why photography, and then I'm going to take you through some of my images and talk about some of the challenges and how being creative and how I see things with the camera helps me cope with living with fibromyalgia. So as Irene said, fibro literally brought me grinding to a halt in 2019. Prior to that, I'd been diagnosed with central sensitivity syndrome by a neurologist, which, for those who might not know, is where the nervous system is stuck in fight, flight, or freeze mode. So it's constantly on high alert, looking for signs of danger. I carried on working in a demanding management position, temperature controlled healthcare deliveries into hospitals, including chemotherapy treatments, etc. So as you can imagine, quite a high stress environment. And then in September 2019, actually the 3rd of September 2019, just over 5 years ago now, got up that morning and literally couldn't function mentally, physically. My balance was off. I had trouble holding a conversation, just could not function at all. So I spent 6 months. So was signed off work. Spent 6 months trying to get back to work. The company I worked for were desperate for me to go back because of what I'd done. I was managing the biggest contract for the company. I'd built a team from scratch, 180 miles away. So I was traveling around the country, and they wanted me to stay on, even if not in that capacity, in some capacity. But that wasn't to be. So in April 2020, it forced me to leave that role, which is quite frustrating when you've put yourself through qualifications and built up experience to try and build a role that will support your family financially and otherwise. Just to give you an example of my background a bit more, I do have a master's degree in management. I had Prince 2 project management accreditation, and I also have a diploma in logistics from the Institute of Logistics in the UK. So it was something that I could do, I was good at, but unfortunately, with the severity of the symptoms, and in particular the brain fog, um, which meant I was looking at spreadsheets and just couldn't comprehend what I was looking at my emails, couldn't even contemplate getting a reply together. That's when I had to step back and try and get back in everything back to where I could function. But unfortunately, that didn't happen as quickly as everyone would have liked. I was referred to the pain clinic. We have pain clinics in the UK, which is where you go after you've had a diagnosis. And as many of you will know, or most of you will probably know, that self-management is the key. There are some medications that they recommend, and some I did try. But I was already doing the things that self-management recommends. So, albeit being on the road, I wasn't eating as healthy as I should have done. But I quickly remedied that once I was at the time to focus on that. I was already sort of going for walks with the camera when I could. Meditation for the past 20 years has been part of my almost daily practice, and yoga as well. I'm very thankful and grateful that I had those two already in my locker when this hit, because I knew that they were something which helped me calm down my nervous system, and they do help me start to function in the mornings. So the question then was, is this it? And it's up to me, because there was nothing else that the medical profession, as they still are very limited in, could advise me to do. There was no further investigation of symptoms. A lot of my challenges come up from a very highly sensitive spine, nervous system in my spine, my neck. I have a partially numb face most of the time. It never goes completely. And when I flare up, that will go completely numb. And I've been back recently, with it having been 5 years, to both the pain clinic and neurologist, and they've said, you're doing all you can, and you're doing a lot more than most people that we see, where we have to push them to do things. You've actually driven yourself to do this. Um, and they're also surprised when I say that just out of the exercise, the diet, etc., that I'm actually 11 kilos lighter than I was when I was working. And I've managed to maintain that with minimal effort and just maintaining that daily routine. I have recently, during the summer, I did try hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and having sort of read that that may help with symptoms, particularly with the fatigue, because we all know that is a major challenge to work through. What it has done, although once I stopped the sessions, the fatigue and the brain fog, etc., came back to where they were before I started those sessions. I did an intensive block of 20 sessions over 5 weeks. The neural circuit dizziness, the loss of balance that I had, has actually gone. Not completely. I still have to be very careful, but it does mean that I feel more secure in walking, especially outdoors, to the point that I'm no longer walking with a walking stick, which I had done for the previous 4 years, 5 years, since I had to stop working. So there is one positive out of that. I've not carried it on because I wasn't finding that there was any further benefit out of it, but I know it's there. If I feel that I'm having a really bad time, I can go back and get a boost, and it will just help calm things down a little bit on top of everything else that I'm doing. Uh, what I what I did want to do, you could tell from sharing the qualifications and the business experience I have. Um, I did want to try and give something back. I was determined that if people were researching, I kept seeing this pop up on X, and in other locations, looking for people to help with either an individual researching for their masters or doctorate, or other research. So I've actually been involved for the last 3 years, 4 years, with a research project which abbreviates to the word CRISP, um, which is looking at various factors and influences in living with chronic pain. So it's broken it down into various areas. I work and co-chair the social influences and factors in what causes chronic pain and what it's like to live with chronic pain, where those influences come in and make it worse or better. There are other ones looking at technology and other different aspects of life. And that will all come together at the end, which is the end of 2025, where then we'll be making a decision with the leaders of the whole project on how we start using this information to hopefully help those of us that are living with chronic and long-term pain. I've mentioned some of these already. Other ways I cope with fibro. One thing I am quite proud of, and so were the medical professionals that I spoke to recently, is that I'm now medication free. I have tried some of the medications, duloxetine and pregabalin, and amitriptyline. Not all together, I hasten to add, but over various times, and felt no improvement in symptoms. And actually, the more longer I was on these things, the worse I felt that they were making my symptoms worse, or the side effects were like my symptoms. So I've come off of them and now I'm coping medication free, which is where the meditation, the yoga, the walking, etc. It's having that routine and being able to manage what I need to do to be able to cope on any given day or any part of a given day. Irene mentioned that I also do music. I like to sing. I write songs, something that's come out. And again, this links into writing. Once I was sitting with my guitar, had nothing else to focus on, like my work, etc. I was finding lyrics started to pour out of me. I do play guitar, and I have written some songs, and I think I've been quite brave actually, and I put some of them on YouTube. So if anyone wants to go and have a look later on, that's my YouTube handle on there for you. Meditation is a great help. So I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I studied it with an organisation called the Brahma Kumaris, based in the UK, but they are a worldwide organisation that some of you may know. And I do have a natural interest in the spiritual side of things, Buddhism, etc. The philosophy makes complete sense. So that has really helped. And a morning meditation, I find after I've had a shower and the shower overstimulates my nervous system, I find the meditation just calms everything down enough for me to then do the next thing in the day, and get me ready for the day. And I really do miss it if I don't do that. Same with my yoga, that I struggle out of bed, I'll feel groggy, but as much effort as it is to actually start doing my yoga, the stretching movements, etc., by the time I get to the end of what is about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how slow I am, that really helps me start to function and just wakes my body up gently. It's about holding the pose and the breath, etc., just like meditation is. And then, of course, there's my exercise, walking my camera. I generally do about 6 to 8,000 steps. That's my aim. I've been a little bit, well, my fatigue has been sliding downwards, and getting worse this year. So I'm finding it a bit more of a challenge. But once I'm out with the camera, I start finding things to photograph, then that takes the distraction away from the effort of walking. Obviously, I can still feel it all, but it's that distraction, and it's my brain's sort of occupied with other things. And once I find one shot, I want to find another and another. Diet is important. I've known for 20-ish years that I have wheat and dairy intolerances. So I've been pretty free of those, although I've had periods where I've tried them again in my diet. Dairy, definitely a no, but wheat I have tried again. Doesn't help. So I've definitely cut that out completely now. Sugar, alcohol, and caffeine have also come out of the diet because sugar, instant, my throat will close up. I'll get a sore throat straight away. Caffeine feels like, the only way I can describe it is it feels like poison going through my veins. I can really feel it going into my body, and when it drops off afterwards, and the pain on those two occasions, intake and when it's dropping out, is so painful. I can live without that. So everything is decaf now. And I'm also finding recently, I don't know if it's a side effect of having the oxygen therapy, but I'm also finding that I'm reducing carbs a lot, and that's helping me stay a lot more balanced as well. I've been finding that I don't need that. I used to have porridge oats for breakfast. And then I started noticing I was feeling a bit heavy that I hadn't felt before. So I gone to having scrambled eggs in the morning with a banana on the side and some seeds. And I'm finding that a lot easier. I will have some carbs later in the day, but potatoes or rice with dinner, or a rice cake or something for a snack if I'm peckish in the afternoon. But definitely reduce down carbs down a lot, and I'm finding that also helps as well. Sleep routine and hygiene is important. I did write a piece on my blog a while ago about this. All the things we know about. It takes a while to get there. When I was in a very busy work environment, the sleep was disturbed. I was on call. Although I'd switch my phone off at night, but there was a lot to do. I had drivers out sort of into the evenings, etc. And because I was the manager of the contract, I was expected to be accessible. I was just getting to a point where I was going to hand that over to people when Fibro stopped me working. So I didn't even get the luxury of saying, "Here you go, now it's over to you guys." But things like a cooler bedroom, so our heating goes off a good couple of hours before we go to bed. It's cooler, etc. I sleep with an eye mask, earplugs if I think it's going to be noisy, if I can hear the neighbours around, etc. Then I will wear those too. Pacing and mindfulness is, as we know, is important. That is something I know that we all have to work very hard at. It's very easy for me. You can imagine with the I was in, it was constant go, go, go. And that's the type of person I am. I was a doer, got pleasure out of doing things. This is where the spiritual, the mindfulness, the meditation comes in. And now I will deliberately stop myself when I feel overwhelmed. I've had a busy few weeks. I've done a few presentations, a bit of writing. I've written for an online magazine called Bold Journey. I've written a second interview article for them. And it's about planning that out and just doing one at a time. Because they spaced out, I stopped myself getting overwhelmed from having all of that to do, realizing that I had a nice step where I could do one, then the other, then the other. Social activity is another thing that I've introduced fairly recently. April this year, I joined the local photographic club. I was looking for more inspiration, looking for some sort of like-minded photographers, and joined the club. What I do find is that it would normally be on a Wednesday evening. I'm with you guys tonight, not them. And I am finding that because I get home after 10 p.m., that my nervous system and brain has been overstimulated by the conversation and the creativity that we've been sharing. But I know that that's important. We also meet for coffee on a Monday morning in the mornings. So that gives me time to wind down after that. So it's adding that extra element in, because I was steady on the rest of my routine. I wanted to add that new element in and just see how my fibro reacted, and then learn how to manage that. So I had a bit of life outside of just walking around on my own with a camera. And then each day I have a to-do list. It's in Google Tasks on my phone, and I'll decide each day what I can contribute to what I want to put out into the world as far as photography, music, or whether it's doing stuff around the home, whether I feel I've got the energy to do things. But it's generally only one thing. If I'm on the computer, it'll only be for an hour or so. If I get 1 or 2 images done, that's great. If it's just to do something else, then I won't do any photographs. I can go some weeks, I can go several days without touching the computer, ideally, because of the way it overloads my system. My vision struggles with screens. But as we all know, living with fibro is constant work in progress. Saying about my vision, one thing that I do find is that if I sit back in a chair for a long time, or I'm sitting in one position, I can feel my eyesight going. And I think with my with screens as well, it's like people talk about with epilepsy and other conditions where it's the flickering light. I also struggle under artificial lighting. So if I go in a place that has strip lighting rather than spot lighting, I can start feeling my system overload. To that end, I've got some glasses. You notice I wear glasses. I have another pair that's got a yellow lens in, and I find that helps as long as I'm not doing things that require me to see the colors. So photography, a creative therapy for coping with fibro. Somebody said to me the other day, photography or music. Well, I enjoy both, but photography is something that gets me out of the house. It gives me exercise, as I've put on here, exercise, nature therapy. You'll see some of my images for those that haven't seen them before. We are close to the countryside here, 10-15 minute walk, and I'm in the countryside. It's a meditation in terms of focus, mindfulness, etc., distraction, pet therapy. We had a dog up till 2012. She passed away. We're in a property where we can't have a pet. So going out, being able to pet the dogs that are out for their walks is nice. It makes me laugh when owners apologize for the dog coming up, and I'm like, no, please, that's fine. It's social interaction as well because of that, and people obviously come up and say, what are you taking pictures of, what have you seen? On the other side of things, it is alone time as well. It just gives you time with your thoughts and times just to be out in the natural world. So Fibro has given me the time to embrace my creativity, my photography. When I was working with family as well, I have a son who's 18 now, but obviously when he was younger, there was family time to consider as well. So my photography kind of fitted in around other things. If I was away for work, I'd take my camera in the car, and then I'd go for a walk in the evenings around the town that I was staying in, and I'd do some street photography just to get out and get a break from the daily grind of managing logistics operations. I am limited mainly to the local area because I can't work. I'm very conscious of expense, etc. But I do make occasional trips, or if friends are going on trips, they'll ask if I want to go along with them. So, for example, London. London's a 30-minute train ride away from where we are, straight into Euston, in North London, and then onto the tube, or a nice walk down into the centre of London. And there's plenty of creative opportunity there. So with being limited mainly to the local area, I need to be creative in looking for new image opportunities. Yes, seasons changing, etc. But I've spent 5 years doing those walks. But I need to be creative, which helps with the distraction. Sometimes I take no pictures, other times I take quite a few, and then I'll whittle it down when I get home. And as Irene said earlier, my main focus has been landscapes, cityscapes, and am increasingly getting into doing street photography. The image there you can see is some surfers at a part of the coast in North Norfolk on the east coast of the UK that I took in September. I've had a play with that. The water's actually more of a browny colour, so I've changed the settings to make the water look more like I'd want to go in it, to be honest. So with the countryside so close, I have to say I'm very lucky to live where I do. And these are just some of the images that I've taken. All of the images in this presentation are taken since I stopped working in 2019. Irene mentioned portraits, etc. You'll have seen some of those maybe on the Facebook post that was posted about the event. They are things that I would like to do more of, but with the brain fog, the fatigue, etc., that I don't get around to organising. So I tend to photograph what's easier, what takes least effort, but gives me all of those other benefits that I mentioned earlier. So you've got things like the local woodland. The last snow we had that settled for any reasonable amount of time was December 2022. And I managed to capture this image of a path that goes through the wood with the tree weighted down in that image in the top left corner. The one next to that in the green with the tree and the light is the same woodland, a different time of year. Just playing with the light, trying to get the sort of image that I feel that people want to step into. We've then got the canal, and this is a foggy morning down at the canal on the top right, with this nice shiny blue boat standing out as I took a walk. And it's things like that that I like to make sure this is where my routine will adapt. So I will get up and go for a walk, although I'll feel every step in my spine and neck and will struggle for the rest of the day. I have to get out because there's the opportunity to create some really atmospheric images. And to be fair, we don't really get that much fog, or we didn't have that much fog last year, or frost. It's been quite mild the winter last year in the UK, in our part of the UK anyway. So I'm hoping that we get some more misty and foggy mornings where it hangs around so that I can get out and get some pictures without needing to rush. The bottom left, you can see again another foggy morning. And what I've done here is I like to play with the settings in the camera. So I've changed the white balance, which is it sort of, you can set it to change the way that the camera perceives the light that's coming into it, and it will change the color. So here I've gone for a cooler white balance, which would generally be used if you were photographing under artificial lights, tungsten lights, and it's made the fog this nice blue color, which makes the red lights on the car stand out, and you can just about make out the yellow in the trees there. Just to go for a different look and feel. I'd quite like the cinematic look where you've got deep contrast and the blues and yellows are quite strong. Then in the middle at the bottom, we've got a location, the lone tree. People seem to like lone tree shots, but I was standing there one day just taking it in and getting some fresh air. And these clouds started building behind. You know, nature is a great canvas when it comes to art, in particular photography. It's right place at the right time. Although you can look at the weather forecast, etc., you never quite know what you're going to get, if anything. So it's days like this that I'm really grateful that I was out for my walk. And then in the same location, but in a slightly different spot, just over a footbridge from where that tree is, we quite often on the main line, we get the steam trains going through on the tours that go up and down the country. So the line that goes from London through Leighton Buzzard goes all the way up north to Glasgow and Liverpool that way. So they're running up and down there. The challenge is finding out when they're running. It's not always obvious, and trying to look them up isn't always easy. So amongst those of us that know, we're always trying to share little bits of information. And I did actually a little while ago, last year, we actually captured the Flying Scotsman, the famous Flying Scotsman doing that run, which was quite a treat. So why photography for my creativity? I've always loved looking at images, especially black and white ones of days gone by. But they are easier than reading for me. I do writing, but I really struggle with it. And it takes me several days, if not longer, to write a blog post because I just have to dump things in and then go back and work it and try and get my brain fog to work on where that article's going. With images, sometimes they don't need words. I just need to say, okay, here's two people walking through a woodland together in a location, in a local woodland that's not the same one as the other images. It's just a short drive down the road, a little too far for me to walk. I wouldn't make it home if I walked there. I could walk there, but not walk back. So images, really, people have their own perception of what they mean. Now, there's two versions of this on the screen. I'm not sure how clear it is for you, but the smaller one in the bottom right is the original image out of camera, what we would call the raw file. So the camera captures all the data so that I can then put it in the software and process it. And this is where the idea with the portal images has helped me with these images as I start capturing more and putting people in them, particularly not models, but just people who are going about their business. And this is where you can see that I've highlighted where the people are. I've highlighted the light and the shadows and brought some of the detail out in some of the leaves to create an image where hopefully you want to sort of walk into it and see where they're going into that light. So bringing the borders in around the edges and darkening those, and so that the light leads you in to where they're walking. As I said earlier, using screens is uncomfortable, so I keep my processing to a minimum as much as I can. It depends. If an image like this might take me several sittings to finish because I know what I want to do, but I do have the sort of brain that starts on something and wants to finish. So this is where the pacing comes in. And if I feel the overload coming, I have to say, okay, I'm going to come back to that another day. So that's the pacing side of things, doing a few images at a time. But in the modern software that you can get now, if I've been on a shoot where the weather stayed the same, the lighting's pretty much the same as I did with a shoot on the coast recently. I was dog sitting for parents in Norfolk, and I got to go to the coast a couple of days while I was dog sitting, which is unusual to be by myself. So I had some quality time just walking around, shooting people with the camera on the promenade and enjoying the beach. That day the weather didn't change. It was overcast, the sky didn't change. So what I was able to do was process one image, and then I could copy and paste those settings onto all the others. Slight tweaks on some of them, but pretty much they're all done in one go by processing one picture. So finding those shortcuts is helpful. Which then makes me familiar with creating my style. So that comes into the routine. I know what look and feel I want to create on my images, whether they're street, whether it's the city, whether it's the landscapes. I know I want the deep contrast, play with the light and shadows, etc., and create something that I like, which is the most important thing, but also something that I am happy to put out into the world. And I've put a exclamation mark on the end of this last bullet point, which I work within my pain limits, but mostly we do push ourselves too hard sometimes. This is one of the images that kicked off the woodland portals. Bottom left, the smaller image is the original image out of camera, which in itself is a nice image, and I liked that image. But when I was sitting there wondering how to, what I could do with my photography and how I was going to get myself active again after having to stop work, I thought I'd have a play around. And what happened, I'd started watching other photographers on YouTube, etc., and just researching how to create certain looks and feels in photography, which I hadn't had time to do while I was working. Then I started playing around with the contrast, the shadows, bringing out detail in selected areas. Rather than doing it on the whole image, you can select certain parts of the image. And this is what I wasn't the one who turned the phrase portal. It was somebody else in Fibro Connect on Facebook. But by creating this leading line where you can see these two individuals, a man and his son, I think, in the distance, just disappearing over the hill. This is the same location as the couple that you saw on the previous slide at a different time of year. But bringing it all in and just bringing it in so that the light is coming towards us out of that area in the distance. When I'm a bit bored of photographing the wider landscape, I put on a different lens on my camera. I have 4 lenses and they give me different things. I like to then focus on the details in the landscape. This time of year is ideal for that. You've got the falling leaves. Spring's a good time. You've got the fern leaves. We've got the fungi coming out at the moment, and this sort of thing. And we've got the light coming through the trees and lighting up the autumn leaves. This is a good way to be mindful. It changes the way I'm going to be creative just by focusing on those details. And sometimes I will just quite often I'll walk with 2 lenses in my camera bag. Sometimes I will take just one and just restrict myself to that, just to change the way I'm looking at things. And this is where my writing and my photography come together, because sometimes straight away I see a metaphor, sometimes it comes later. Other times it's just about sharing that experience. So for example, getting low for the fungi, my experience will be that's painful because I'm bending down, I'm having to get low, try and do a shot straight on rather than looking down on them. So what I have done recently is realize that I needed a camera that had my camera was made in 2007, so it didn't have a live view screen, but it's done me well, and it's got me to this point. But I realized by using my son's camera, which is slightly newer than the one I had, that had a live view, that was going to make things easier, because I was finding moving my neck and putting my eyes up against the eyepiece, it was affecting my vision, the pain in my spine and neck. So I've recently acquired a camera that has a live view screen. It's the same age as my other camera, but it's now a semi-pro rather than a beginner camera. And that's changing again the way that I can be creative, and it's opening up opportunities. And it's also changing it, to liken it to writing, it's also changing the way that I then see things, and that changes what I write about as well, or how I'll write about that shoot that I'm doing and the experience, as well as sharing for those that are into photography, sharing why it's useful and what I was doing in camera, etc. I will try and get the shots in camera that I want as close as possible, because I have two options with the software I have. I can either download it into the Canon software, I have a Canon camera, which takes it straight out of the camera as was shot. And if I want to keep that, I can. Otherwise, I can load it into a different software, which is a open source alternative to Lightroom and Photoshop, but that only takes the raw data, and then I have to start all over again, which is fine for like the woodland image where I'm going to create the shadows and bring the edges in with vignetting, etc. That's fine. But I wanted the option, and on this live view screen I can now see what the final image is going to be by making the adjustments while I'm lining up the shot. So for example, I've been taking leaf pictures, the autumn leaves, while they're still on the trees with the sunlight coming through this week. The example in the bottom right here is not this year, it's previous year, but similar type of image. And through the camera I can see if I've got the shot I want to get, which is this sort of image that you can see on the screen. And for those that are also wondering with the spider's webs why there's two versions, this is another example of changing the white balance and the mood and the feel of an image. So you saw it with the blue fog effect in the other image. It makes it feel cold, it makes it feel like it's winter. The original shot I normally shoot with the warmer balance, which is the web picture in the bottom, in the middle of the bottom row. So that's the image that I would have shot in camera. I've tweaked contrast, etc. in the software just to bring out the detail and make that light sort of glow in the corner. Then I decided I wanted to see what it would look like if I went to a cooler white balance. And as you can see, same image, but a different look, different feel, a bit more Halloween-y perhaps, as we're at that time of year. But that option is there. So sometimes I will shoot with the white balance set to something that I would not always use, just to see how it looks and feels. It can always be changed back in software. All of this can be changed in the software afterwards. But again, that helps my creativity just by seeing something different on the screen and just trying to ignite and get my fatigue and my brain fog to sort of think, actually, there's something there. Let's distract ourselves. We're trying some more shots. We're not photographers, we're therapists. I listened to a podcast called the Photo Walk podcast. It's made, it's about 4 years it's been going now. I found it during COVID times. It's normally about a couple of hours long each week. And this phrase really sort of stood out to me. And it's also more about people using photography as therapy, to overcome mental health challenges, other health challenges, or just have a break from the world, and get out and just sort of be mindful and observe other things. So I thought that would be nice to include on here. And as you can see from the top, I've put the title Fisheye Lens. Now, this is an extremely wide image. What I did during COVID, I treated myself to a fisheye lens, which on my camera gives me a 167-degree view. And I've got a more extreme picture on the next slide, which will give you a really good example of this. But on this, I think you can all see my mouse. If I'd been using my standard kit lens, I probably would have just got the train and a little bit of the glare from the sun. With the fisheye lens, I can actually see the canal which runs parallel with the railway just down here in the bottom left, halfway up the image. So this meadow is between the canal and the mainline railway. And this is early one morning. I'd actually passed a couple of friends who were photographing the church, which is just, well, it's straight ahead as we're looking at this image. They were trying to get a shot of the church. They were looking at the sky and they were thinking nothing's going to happen. So I just kept walking. I said, I'll see you guys later. I kept walking and stood on top of this hill and waiting, just watching the trains, hoping that the sun would start bursting through, increasing the contrast to bring this out in the image. And it did. And thankfully, it was glowing off of this train as it went through. It didn't last long, just that one train, and then it sort of died down again. But patience paid off. I just stood there, enjoyed the morning. When the trains have gone, it's peaceful, it's quiet. You can just hear the birds singing and the occasional car going past over a humpback bridge over the canal. That lens then gives me different options to play around with, especially for landscapes, where sometimes you want to get more in, more panoramic type shots in the image. So again, just playing around with that lens. And I was thinking recently, shall I keep it? And I think I will, because I think there's a lot more scope to use it with going out and about. And this is an extreme example of what that lens will do. I am fascinated and just intrigued by the architecture, especially of churches and cathedrals. Don't get to go to many, but this is Norwich Cathedral, which is in the east of England, up in the Norfolk county of Norfolk, near where my parents live. So when we were up and visiting, we're quite often at the coast, but on this occasion, we'd driven into Norwich with them for a day out, and we finished the day at Norwich Cathedral. And I deliberately packed my fisheye lens, knowing that we were planning to do this as a family. So my wife, my son, myself, and my parents, and we went there. However, this is looking straight up. In case you haven't guessed, you can see on the left the windows of one end of the cathedral, and on the right you can see the pipes of the organ at the other end. This is the 167-degree view. However, I was looking straight up. I should have really laid down for this. I would have looked a bit odd, but I would have still got the shot, but I didn't. I crouched down right under the center area of the church and looked up, bending my neck, and made myself feel really bad, but I got the shot. So yeah, this is one of the challenges with Fibro sometimes, and this is before I had a live view screen, but obviously I wanted to get as low down to the ground as possible, to take the shot, because I wanted to include as much of the sides as I could and the areas going top to bottom in this image. Plus you've got some of the windows, etc., the detail around the edges here. And people have said to me that just looking at it on the screen can make them feel a bit queasy. It does me sometimes, but when it's bigger like this on the screen, it's not too bad, I don't think, anyway. So, the challenges are there, but also this drive to try and create something different, find a different angle to look at things. So whether it's writing or whether it's photography, whether it's my music, trying to find something different that I might not have heard before, at least, or seen before, and just create something that I like and want to look at. But also, it's a plus if other people enjoy looking at it too. So I thought I would just sort of close with a little bit of street photography. I've only got a couple of slides, but for a reason when we come on to the next slide. London is, as I've said, is a short train ride away. Geographically, we're about 40 miles outside. It's 30 minutes by train if we can get the fast train in at the right time of day. And while it's not necessarily a cheap day, because you've got your train ticket, you've got tube travel, etc. When you're there, it is a fascinating place. Very cosmopolitan. People are more individual. There's more cultures, different fashions, different styles. The buildings, you've got the contrast of the old and the new, etc. And then just people watching. Shooting as we're walking around. So if I just talk you through from the left, we were in an area called Brick Lane in the east of London. It's known for the food down there, the street food, and the cafes, etc. But also there's a large amount of graffiti and street art on the walls, which is great to photograph, but also to get people as they're walking past. So quite often I will walk just with my camera by my side, and as I see people walking, etc., I'll just shoot from the hip, as it's called, and capture an image, which resulted in this one. There is quite a lot of processing done here to sort of bring your focus on the girl walking in to the shot, um, but it sort of focuses your eye to where she's going and beyond. The one next to her, looking down on people in the shadow, reminds me of a Lowry painting a little bit with the stick figures, etc. This is looking down from the Covent Garden Opera House cafe, and looking down onto Covent Garden area. It was actually the summer, yeah, early summer, end of spring. So the sun was quite high, but again, by looking at it and playing with the light and the shadows, I've actually made it look like it's more of a low sunlight, wintry sort of scene with just a spot there highlighted. In the bottom right, just some street photography. I thought the fact that this is the Marks and Spencer's store that's closed in the city of London, and I thought that the smiley faces on the posters with the people walking past saying, you know, they're smiling but they're saying we're closed, was quite a nice contrast, and the people just walking past. This is a sort of photography that just keeps my creativity going. There's always something to shoot with people, and especially in somewhere like London. The nearest thing I have to me here is a city called Milton Keynes, which is the other direction to London, but it's literally 10 minutes drive up the road. So I am going to start doing some street photography up there. It's got a theatre area, etc., which lights up at night. And it's not somewhere I've really explored, but I was thinking to myself the other day, can't always go into London. What's the closest thing we've got? Because to shoot in Leighton Buzzard isn't the same. You haven't got that mix of people, cultures, etc. Everyone's dressed the same in black hoodies and black joggers, etc. There's not much there to photograph. So I need somewhere where there's sort of the steel in the glass, maybe some older buildings. Milton Keynes is actually a new city. I was only started developing 50 years ago, established 50 years ago. So there's plenty of steel and glass reflections in windows, columns on office buildings that I can do those sorts of shots. And then in the top right, you've got an example of a really old street, Throgmorton Street, in the city of London, the financial area. This guy did actually stop on my shoulder as I was about to take the shot, because he thought I didn't want him in the shot. I said, no, please go. I want some interest in the image. So he cycled down there and I managed to get this image of him cycling down there. So as you can hear, the street photography side of things gives me more input, really. It gives me more creativity and it gives me something different. And I think sometimes, whether we're writing, whether we're doing art of any type, whether it's photography or something else, we just need to change our perspective or our location, or to change the way we're looking at things, or that might ignite something else. By shooting in London, could I create that in Leighton Buzzard or nearby in Milton Keynes, that sort of thing? Where could I go that's easier to get to? And this is what I also get from watching the YouTube photographers. I might not get to travel to all these places, wonderful places they do in the world, but especially watching the street photographers who do London, who do New York and other cities around the world. There are locations like that where I can actually perhaps create an image like that in the right light, etc., the right time of day, the right time of year, might be able to create that locally, or at least going up the road to Milton Keynes and do the same. Now, when we were in London in July, it was actually raining. 6th of July, it was raining, and I'd been planning to go to London for a while. I hadn't been for quite a while, and I said to my wife, I want to go. I need to refresh. I need to just different environment to go and do some photography, so I'm going to go. So, having joined the photographic club, I put out a post saying, I'm going into London. Does anyone want to join me? Yeah, so half a dozen of us went to London, and actually it changed the day, because most of us were available on this particular Saturday. I was going to go on a Friday because I wanted to be there when the city was busy, and I was going to go into the city area, the financial area of London, in the east part of London. But actually, by going on the Saturday, we caught this unexpected sight. I told them I wanted to start at a location which is a church which was I think it's been destroyed several times over its history, going back hundreds of years. But after the Second World War, they didn't rebuild it. They turned it into a city garden. When we turned up, there were these dancers practicing their routine. Bless them. It was chucking it down with rain, but they were being filmed by their instructors, and they were practicing their routine. So of course we already had our cameras in our hands, and we were just everyone else thought I'd organised this, and I hadn't. And I was just like standing there in disbelief, capturing shots. When I got home, I thought, what's the best way of showing these images? So after I'd cleaned them up, etc., I put them in a short video just to sort of do a sequence of the movement of the dancers. And what I noticed when on my phone, the still on the video was where one frame was blending into another, and I noticed they were overlapping. And when I looked at the images, I realized for a large majority of them, somehow, even though I was doing handheld, I hadn't moved the camera. I just kept shooting as they moved on continuous shoot. So I had a play, and that's the image you can see on the right hand side. There's actually several versions of this and one of the dancers next to them. I created an overlay of about 7 images. I can't remember exactly how many, to capture that motion in a still image of the dancers and the movements they were making. And I have to put in the title here. It was getting painfully creative. This is where my brain has brilliant ideas, but my fibro pays me back or really makes it painful to do. So having to do it in steps and pace myself, gave myself a headache doing this because I was that desperate to see if it worked. I didn't pace myself very well, but the result has been, I couldn't be happier with the result. And to be honest, a cropped version of this, taking away the legs a little bit, but just the top half from the sort of the knees upwards. I put it into into one of our open competitions at Photographic Club a few weeks ago, and actually got 20 out of 20 from an external judge who didn't know the image, doesn't know any of us. He's just doing them cold when he judges them, and I got a 20 out of 20. Don't need that validation, but it was nice that a complete stranger saw it and thought that highly of the image. So that gave me a bug of wanting to find more dancers. So I'm just wondering if I can tie in with local dance clubs and any adults that might want sort of images of their own, not necessarily to sell, but just to get creative again. But for Fibro, the challenge there, where this was unexpected and it was great, completely candid, they didn't mind us photograph. Everyone had cameras, had phones out. We weren't the only people watching them and filming them or photographing them. Having to organize that would completely overload me, and I might not enjoy or get the best out of a shoot. And this is the fine line I've got to balance with my photography, is how far I can go with it. Do I keep it where I just go for my walks and capture what I capture? I occasionally go through a different location, see what's there, etc. Keep going back if it's local, and then capturing people, scouting locations, then going back when they're busier for the candid shots. But to organize things would be too much. And I was actually talking this through with somebody at Photographic Club Coffee Morning the other morning, who said that there had been a group of them, a subgroup of them, 3 or 4 of them a few years ago, looking at organizing portrait shoots, etc., just to develop those skills, share equipment, etc. So I said that I'd be in, as long as I could share the load of organizing that and coordinating the day, etc. Because directing models is exhausting, because you're trying to picture the images you want and you're trying to direct them, and they might, depending how experienced they are, there's a lot of factors there. That's very taxing on a brain that just doesn't want to function at all. Last slide. So what's next? I'm realizing that Fibro and Photos needs to be my brand. It needs to be what my work goes out there as. Some of it is under Dale Rockell Photography, some of it's under Dale Rockell on X. But as far as the blog goes, etc., and also a YouTube channel that I've now created, I'm going to start sharing my photography and talking about my photography on some videos from shoots that I do. Fibro and Photos needs to be that brand. Irene mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to be in the 50 Shades of Fibro book, which I'm very honoured to be in and to be asked, as I am speaking tonight. And that has then triggered this talk, doing this talk, the book, and talking to the photographic club, and also then off the back of that being asked to do another talk in February next year to another group. Has got me thinking that I should be, maybe instead of trying to get people to buy individual prints, I'm going to look at creating a photo book which shares my story. So something along the lines of Fibro and Photos, a photographic journey for coping with chronic illness. Because I think if I put chronic illness rather than just fibromyalgia, that will open up the market a little bit more. And here's my marketing skills. What I have of them left still coming in by trying to work out how big an audience I can get to. And I'll just keep taking my photo walks and looking for inspiration wherever I can. I've always got my camera in my hand when I'm out and about. And that is my last slide and the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.